that are here for the long haul. But no matter what we do, things will happen. So if you do a really good job in your organization and prevent bad things from happening, sometimes the money to respond to bad things goes away. Have you seen that in your organizations? So we want to make sure that the vigilance and the capabilities don't go away. Let's stop them small. We've seen that if you get a really good deal on some really bad stuff and you buy a bunch of it, it means you got a lot of really bad stuff around. Try to avoid that. So we're trying to really work on minimizing the amount of hazardous materials within your facility if you don't need it. And then the emphasis here is to do the right things in the beginning so you don't take a bad event and make it worse. And really that was a lot of the emphasis back at the ammonia safety training activities, is if you know how the system works, you can take actions that will prevent it. But in the case of ammonia, I'm sure many of you use ammonia here, that the actions you take on the low pressure side, if you do that on the high pressure side, will have negative consequences. So it's important to understand the systems and how they work, and every plant's different. Okay? And then, again, we want to make sure if you turn off a valve here, it doesn't make bad things happening downstream. So, in retrospect, they say, these programs work, but they do take a long time to come into place. And they really require a multi-level, multi-display, multimedia approach, meaning that more than just about any other place, this county works effectively, I believe, with its industry. That they really do, as Matt indicated earlier, they want you to succeed. But we recognize that we have a responsibility to protect the workers, in the case of CalOSHA, and the environment and the community at large. And some of you, as we all know, butt up to where people live, right? So we need to be vigilant. And this is a highly industrialized area. And one of the points that I like to make is that this may be self-constraining. I've seen this around on the public sector side in emergency response. That we've done such a good job in preventing large and frequent hazardous materials incidents that being able to maintain the hazardous materials response team has become very difficult because they're not cheap. They take a large commitment. And on the decision makers, they go, well, we haven't seen that much. Why are we putting this much money in? So we used to have dedicated teams. Now we're basically working in an engine company or also a hazmat team. So the thing is that as long as we use hazardous materials and as long as we have people, you're the people, that something bad's going to happen eventually. So done a good job mean things that aren't going to go south on us. So, again, what are the ramifications? The unified program, that's a hazardous materials, hazardous waste, underground tanks, above ground tanks, CalARP, and the worker safety programs done in California by CalOSHA, is we are seeing less incidents. And we are seeing less injuries, and we are seeing less fatalities, thankfully. Okay? And we have less large incidents, but again, we are still going to have those. Right? We have, I deal in the refinery world. When refineries go south, there can be big problems. Right? And in fact, a lot of the events here that we're dealing with, I can thank my job because in August of 2012, the Richmond refinery decided to put a big black cloud over the Bay Area. Okay? You throw a big black cloud over the Bay Area during rush hour, there's going to be consequences, right? So you can thank them. Right? But we've also seen events, many of them small, but could have gone really poorly in other parts of the state, especially when, let's say, a refinery is up for sale. Somehow or another, things tend to happen around those times. And we want to take advantage of that and maybe make sure that new owners implement really stringent, effective emergency response and prevention activities. Okay? So I talked about being able to justify our existence, and it's also difficult to maintain skills. I have some hazmat team up in Northern California, and the thing called hazcatting. It's basically like bucket chemistry, where you figure out how you deal with an unknown. Well, they had a bunch of paint cans on the side of a highway, and they were hazcatting these paint cans just for the practice, because they hadn't gone out on any calls in a long time. Okay? So I want to quickly go over Executive Order 13650. What happened was West Texas, ammonium nitrate blows up, and the Chevron Richmond facility. So what happened? An executive order came out from the president, said, okay, you agencies get on it. The three main are US EPA, Fed OSHA, and Department of Homeland Security. Those of you that use ammonia and ammonium nitrate in this community, this put that on the radar. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I really want to focus in on what they talked about, best practices. And everything in the rest of this presentation I pinched off this website on the executive order. So they want to talk about 5 elements. Okay, strengthening community planning and preparedness, getting the feds to actually work with the folks that are actually doing the work, doing effective data management, okay, bring some of the stuff up to speed. Those of you that work under the HAZWOPER standard realize that it was put into place in the late 80s and has not been updated actually since then. Okay? And then incorporating the end users into the developing best practices. So, in the mind of the feds, best practices, they're voluntary, meaning you do it because you're not being forced to, kind of, right? You document it. You actually figure out what's going on. You put it down on paper. You're able to measure whether it actually works or not, right? Whether you can do it again. You know, was it Einstein once said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different answer, right? And then that you can actually put it under scrutiny. And here they just talk about how the different activities in terms of best practices, hopefully that by the end of it you have a proven practice. So one of the things that we do, we work a lot in Contra Costa County, and Steve alluded to the work there, through their community awareness and emergency response program, where every 2 months they sit down and all the major industries talk about the things they've done. And they talk about those near misses, and they actually basically open up their dirty laundry and say, here's what happened, and here's what we learned about it. And that actually filters down to everyone else. Okay? So technology, and again, as we saw in the live streaming, the higher the level of technology, the greater the chance it won't work when you really need it. So always have a low-tech backup. Okay? Training. I think we've all sat through training where the training had no relationship with what you really needed to do when something bad happened, right? So plan like you're going to respond and train like you're going to respond. Make sure there's a linkage there. You say, oh, we train like this, and in real life you don't do it. That's not worth anything. And we really like to push the idea of safer alternatives. Okay? Process safety, I'm not going to spend much time here. There's going to be a lot of talk about that throughout the day. A lot of this on the administrative side, making sure that you got good plans. Okay? Now, I write a lot of emergency plans. Ladies and gentlemen, a thick plan is not a good plan, right? You don't impress people in emergency plans by all the crap you stick in there. If you can't find the information you need very quickly, it's not worth anything. You always want to write your plans as if you've got basically a heart rate of around 180 beats per minute. If you're scared to death and you can't find what you need, that plan is worthless. Right? Make sure the stuff you have is simple, that you can access it, and it's not like, don't write War and Peace. Okay? So, on the first responder side, okay, information availability. Too often we see responders going to a facility, and even though you've reported everything to an agency, the folks right on the tailboard, metaphorically, don't know what's inside there. Okay? Make sure you take advantage of training opportunities like this. Okay? Have the good information, coordinating throughout the communities, right? And managing the information out in the remote areas. Okay? So you've got a really, got some urban parts and some really rural parts. And the differences in response can be significant, especially in response times. For you in industry, we want to ensure that you're coordinating the activities with everyone else. So you've got not only the refineries, the gas plants, and other folks work together. Okay? And we want to make sure that you integrate with the first responders. Here's a little secret. If you want your first responders, your hazmat team to show up and on a walkthrough, they may be very busy. If you offer them lunch, they will tend to show up. Just a little thing, right? They will tend to show up, right? Partly because the public said they can't offer food. And make sure your safety and security operations. Now, some of you are under CFATs, the Chemical Facility Anti-Terrorism Standards. I think they stink, personally. And I really think that they should be incorporated in the RMP. They add a whole new layer that I think is very difficult. Okay? And your supply chain. Again, if you're not using a bunch of stuff, don't keep it there. Okay? And then work with your environmental groups. Work with your communities and work with labor. Labor, the people that know what's going on, are the people that are the business end of your equipment. If you don't learn from them, you're doing yourself and everyone else a disservice. Okay? And there are a lot of activities. The local emergency planning committee here is, fairly active. Please engage. I will be back in December at the LEPC meeting to talk again about the regs I'm going to talk about this afternoon. So if you have more interest in that, we'll probably talk about that in greater depth. And that's all I got for this morning. Boy, that was torturous for you, wasn't it? Okay. But we'll talk about the meat a little bit later. Are you taking questions, Steve, or are we moving right along? Moving right along. Okay.